Again, Rachel, part of also what you do at Help a Child Africa is matters to do with vocational training skills. Tell us more about that. Do we need to start focusing on that area as a country?
Skills. We know a lot of children in Kenya who don't naturally transition into university as much as it was a dream. So either because of poverty or because they just didn't get the grades to go to university. So we really want to harness every child's potential by making sure they understand it's not the end of life. So we encourage young people either drop from primary school or high school, but transition to the formal tertiary education. And the government has been so keen on this, and they've revamped the vocational training in Kenya. So it gives the children the opportunity not just to focus on I'm in the university, I'm in a college or a formal institution, but they are skills based. So whether I want to be a carpenter or a masonry, and you'll agree with me, right now in most urban areas, the most sought after skills are the skilled masonry skills. Whether you're a plumber, whether you are an artisan, whatever kind of handy skill you can be able to give, it's now becoming more profitable. But then again, we have to structure it so that it's not very juakali. So we make sure that support is given to this vocational institution by encouraging young people that when you transition, it's not the end of life, and you can still have a promising future in a good career by just using your God-given skills. So these are skills where people are very handy in, they are talented in. It can be just carving stone, it can be carpentry, it can be baking, whatever it is. So it makes sure that a large pool of people who transition to colleges and universities still have hope in life by using their skills in a different level. So I feel vocational training, whether it's agricultural or technical, it's really a good opportunity, especially for this large number of transition to tertiary education.
And great points you've raised there in regards to matters vocational training. Now, coming to digital platform, adopt digital learning has been a statement mentioned during this pandemic. How practical has it been for us here as a country to adopt that platform?
It's really not been easy. You'll remember right now we are in a pandemic and it caught all of us off guard. So we had abrupt closure of schools, and we have children stuck with us and we are prepared for it. Remember, digital training or digital learning in Kenya began way in 2016, but 4 years later still, we are not yet there. So the biggest challenge we've had in terms of the transition, number one, schools were closed. Students were not inducted on how to use ICT for education, with teachers and parents were not also equally taught. And then if you compare urban and rural areas, you even find some students have better and more sophisticated skills than their teachers and parents. And parents at home, they are ill-equipped to even improve digital learning for their children because they lack the skills to do that. So you'd also find in urban setups, maybe the students, if you have more than one child, most home would. The ones which are privileged in urban areas will at least have one computer. So if you have 2 or more children and each has a program to run, it means they still have to wait for each other. Then in rural areas, when you check, of course, internet is not easily available. Computers are not easily available. So what has come in handy very much in rural areas is the use of radio. And it's still achieved. For some, you find it's pre-recorded, you find there's no interaction with the students. But I would say the biggest gap is the internet connectivity, and number 2, the skills at both teacher level, parent level, and the student level to be able to use ICT to support learning. And also when you look at parents, now we've been forced to embrace homeschooling. But then again, the success of homeschooling largely depends on the literacy level and tech savviness of the parents or the caregivers. And of course, we are all economically and financially strained, so the extra cost of internet computers is competing against our basic needs. So the transition has not been smooth, and definitely the poor rural children have suffered the most because they do not have favored by technology. So we are talking about access to power, access to internet, access to this equipment, which are not largely available.
You've mentioned ICT education. Is it a time when we need to start implementing digital literacy?
So Doreen, you'll remember in 2016, the government launched the DigiSchool, which is also the digital literacy program. And they had an audacious vision to make sure that every pupil is prepared for today's digital world through use of technology, content and teaching to transform learning in Kenya into a 21st century system. Then they had different agendas, like for example, the content, making sure each school is ready, building the capacity of the teachers, providing the infrastructure, and also making sure that the content is relevant. So the first phase was already completed, I think last year, where 150 schools participated, three schools from each country, and that 69 special needs schools. And the first phase focused on learning to use, and this is where they expose learners to friendly technology to encourage its early adoption. The phase that they are currently in is using to learn technology, and this is aimed to expose learners to technology, idea concepts for learning to enhance creativity and innovation. The last phase, they intend to make sure they're using technology to produce. So for example, for more employment creation. So if you ask me, we already began this journey since 2016. But the reality on the ground is it's not, we have very good policies, we have very good vision, but on the ground it's not the same. So a rural school, let's take for example in Turkana, they do not even have electricity. They've never seen a computer. Internet is not even there. So much as we have a good vision in terms of the digital literacy program, it's not actualized in every school. And right now, if you check, the more advantaged will be urban areas or private schools, wherever they are, that are able to have this technology. And even in schools, even when you take high schools, for example, people who have like computers, you'd find in a school, national school of maybe about 1,000 kids, there are only 5 computers. So you're also talking about the contact time that a child has on a machine on their own that is not shared. So for me, I still feel we have a very long way to go. And if you're talking about digital, it's about full access to computers, having free internet and computer literacy to just make sure that now everyone will understand the desktop. But right now, I would say, yes, we already began thinking about it. We have a very good program in vision, but on the ground, it's not a reality.
All right, Racheal, with all that you've said, in your perspective, how is digital learning taking shape in this country?
So it's slowly taking shape, and thanks to the pandemic has both good side and bad side. So right now, both policymakers, parents, teachers, students, and communities have been forced to think about digital learning. But then again, we have systemic and policy barriers that would impede anyone who is willing to adopt technology. So when we look at the digital divide, for example, we have the economic divide. Some people can afford to have a computer and internet when others cannot. Then we also have the usability divide, whereby technology still remains so complicated that many could not use a computer even if they got one for free. And even for those who are using a computer, like you and I, accessing all the benefits of having one is beyond our understanding. For example, a simple application like the Excel application, we probably only know the autosum function, but there are so many things Excel can be able to do for us that we don't utilize. And also included in the group that has the usability divide, those people who have low literacy and people who've never been to school. Then we also have the empowerment divide, and this is concerned about how we use technology to empower others. So it's about using technology to solve problems, to make sure we can earn money and to empower individuals. So I would say we are still in the formative stage, whereby a pandemic has forced us to transition how we use technology as a luxury, but right now it's actually a basic need also in education. So I would say we have a lot of teaching problems, but a lot of them are policy and systemic. That even if we had even if we have like the free laptop program, even if we are to drop a computer or a laptop to every household in Kenya, we still have the usability divide that would make sure that some people still are not able to use the computer. So thanks to the pandemic, we are in a very precarious situation whereby we have to use it, but then again, I would focus more on the rural children because they are the most disadvantaged. They do not have power, they do not have internet, they do not even have a computer. So as long as we don't have a computer, we don't have internet, there's no literacy, there will never be equity. But then again, I know our mobile ownership is very high, but when you're talking about access to digital technology, it's not about the phone, it's about all these components of, is it shared, if you have internet, is it reliable, is it functional? So it's more than having a phone. So for me, I would say we still have a long way, but some people have adapted, some are lagging behind, but the most lagging behind are poor rural children who do not even have the basic necessity, let alone internet. So we are talking things like power and access to a device.
You had also mentioned poverty and lack of electricity as being one of the challenges. From your perspective, what do we need to do to get away from that so as to make this internet access and digital platform accessible to every child?
So I think a lot of it, I've said a lot of our challenges are systemic and policy and are at government level. So for example, I've said for me, I view equity, like digital equity, having access to a computer that is not shared, making internet free, and making sure computer literacy, then we'll have digital equity. So some of the recommendations, and mostly it's to the government, need to explore ways to expand information infrastructure and increase access by improving markets and reduce the cost of service, especially for internet. So right now, where we are, I would view internet as a basic need because everything we are doing, you require internet, whether you want to buy consumables from the store so that you don't go and interact with people, whether your child has to sit a 1-hour exam, whether your child has to rehearse content or revise content, we need internet. So for me, it's a basic need, and government should look at ways, especially for the rural poor, to make it either free or highly subsidized so that it doesn't compete with my basic needs. Then also we need to provide alternative solutions that are low cost and effective and affordable for people. So for example, for rural communities that are not connected to the main power, is it possible to have like a nationwide solar campaign where every household, at least, if you're not connected to the national power grid, you're able to access solar systems. Again, we also need to, if we can locally assemble, and I know with the digital learning program, they were making some of those laptops locally. So can we have at least each house, even if not every child, has a device that they can be able to use to support them in the learning program. Also in public areas, were it not for the pandemic, community centers would have worked, where maybe you just put the connection and make computers available and internet in the community facilities that they can use through the whole day. And of course, we need to promote digital literacy through campaigns or incentives so that at least they're not saying I have a computer but I cannot use it because I'm not computer literate. And finally, maybe forming partnerships with successful entities and robust networks, for example, our mobile service providers. So they would form a good strategic partner for us to see how we can have education for all by overcoming these different obstacles.
Points raised there, Racheal. And also, how has lack of proper online investment by institution affected children and learners during this time?
So the effect is very great. Now, one I've mentioned, closure of school was abrupt. No one prepared for it. And most schools right now, other than focusing on providing the content, they are now in the phase where we have to have the infrastructure and the technology in place. So one of the limiting factors is they were not prepared, they did not have budgets for it. And secondly, it's cost intensive to set up an ICT system from scratch, teach the teachers how to provide the content and also to make sure that learning is effective. On the other side of the students, it's also something happening for them at the past. And right now I'm not focusing on private schools who already had the systems in place. I'm talking about the rural school in Turkana that has never seen a computer. So the cost investment is something that is cost heavy, that schools are not planned for. And with the free primary education, you realize very minimal will go to such an eventuality where we are forced to. So it's very challenging, and I would say the most affected are public schools and the rural poor who did not have time to prepare. And even if they are given right now, let's say the government distributes laptops for free right now in every home, still there's the literacy gap that needs to be filled. So the challenge is great, and I would say we've really not adapted, and not everyone is on the same page. And even for the schools that have already adopted digital learning, realize challenges exist because of user interaction, it's not interactive. Some of them are pre-recorded or they just share assignments to be done. So that's not the same as a physical interaction in a classroom.
Preparation, which is key. So now then, what can government and telecommunication companies do to enhance internet access to support learning?
So number one for me right now is a basic need. So is it possible it be highly subsidized for those who can afford, and for those who cannot afford it, can it be free? And this can be, we can say maybe in every village you set up an internet center or a community center where a schedule is prepared, kids come and learn, because right now it's really urgent that we do something about it. We can't keep complaining that pandemic or corona has stopped our lives, but we need to do something to address this challenge. So for me, I feel the immediate need would be at village level, is it possible we at least map each village, which teachers are available, how quickly can we use these teachers as mentors or helpers to the kids to be able to at least learn and continue the learning. And even when absolutely impossible, can we at least immediately begin a literacy campaign to make sure that digital literacy is not viewed as a luxury anymore, but it becomes part of our basic needs. So the only solution is free internet for all. But again, I mentioned without an individual computer, without the internet and computer literacy, then it still becomes a big challenge to say that we've solved the problem. So I think for the government and our communication service providers, it's making internet widely accessible for everyone.
All right, and coming to you as Director Help a Child Africa, what have you been doing to assist the government scale up digital learning?
So, yeah, thanks Doreen for that. So we've done several initiatives. The number one is just raising the awareness of what the government is doing. Remember our target population, they are very vulnerable, they are poor people, they are illiterate, majority of them. So they do not know, they are not always online to know what's happening or what's transpiring. So we've been trying to package relevant information that is school related and disseminating the same to our beneficiaries. So we do this through our community volunteers who help us to track the children, follow up on their progress. So we act as the link between whatever the government is saying and our community. We do not even have simple things like a radio. We've also supported setting up of knowledge hub that promote ICT learning in communities, and this is training. Some communities have opted to have a knowledge hub within their community where they can be able to teach other youth and young children about ICT and technology. We're also promoting intergenerational learning to build capacity in ICT, and by this I mean in a typical household or a village, you would at least know one person who can use a computer. So can we use that person to help the structures around the community, to help children navigate these challenging times in terms of learning? And of course, we'll continue to advocate for improvement of the schools to ensure a fair ground in ICT across all schools. And we've also, in some communities, through the groups we work with, the self-help group, we've managed to advocate for installation of solar power in some of the communities. This way it means even if they're not connected to the national power grid, they are able to actually have access to a form of lighting. So these are some of the things. And for the candidates, what we've done is just making sure they have access to the learning materials, revision papers. So we are prioritizing like people who are what to sit for their national exam this year, and we are giving them the revision materials for them to be able to practice, so that by the time they are to sit their exam, they are not panicking, but they are ready to take up the challenge. So this we are doing in partnership with the different communities and government to just make sure they have revision materials. And also, lastly, we have a parenting module, and you'll realize, Doreen, when we have such pandemics, we have such increased rates of domestic violence against women, children, and men alike. And you'll have, and chances are some students will not probably go back to school either because they've been married off or they are pregnant. So we have a lot of psychological trauma that have happened to kids by being at home and also not being able to be actively engaged in learning. So we've improved our parenting module to ensure it covers holistic support. So, for example, adding elements of just coping with such stress that caused by a pandemic and loss of the head of the household not being able to provide, or homes becoming dysfunctional. So in our parenting module, we're including elements of just psychosocial support for parents to be able to cope and nurture their children through such a crisis.
All right, so great works you've been doing there, Racheal, to just help the vulnerable persons. But what has that experience been like, working with these vulnerable learners?
It's very challenging. It's very, very challenging. And again, I say for the rural poor child, The only thing they know is that piece of book and pen. They do not know any. So it's really challenging. And for them, they're really depending on the social structure around them to be able to cope with learning in the middle of a pandemic. Remember also child labor is really on the increase. So most
Yeah.
parents would prefer just seeing an extra pair of hands to help me with the farm, to help me with house chores. So even the time dedicated to learning is very little. So for us, we really hope the structure we've created around communities. We have child monitors where we are working. They're able to call and find out how is the child faring. Are you guys okay? Is there any incident that has been reported? How far are they with revision? So it's still very manual. It's not digital. But then again, it's because of where they are right now. So for us, it's a lot of support to make sure that parents understand the help the children need to be able to transition and also cope with the pandemic. And we're doing this through the community volunteers that we're working to make sure that we follow up on individual children to make sure that they're also coping very well with the pandemic and also adapting.
Okay, and you reach as many children as possible, Racheal. What are some of the challenges you've met in your endeavor to do that?
So the challenges are many. So for example, I've mentioned, and I'll repeat again, accessibility of these things is a luxury to many. Having a computer, having internet, these are luxuries. So for example, in urban areas, you'll find students have IT skills that are more sophisticated than their teachers and parents. So it means even if I need help at home, my parent is not literate enough or tech savvy enough to be able to help me. Then you'd find also in some families, it's more than one child, and if they have to learn continuously at the same time, it's not possible. For rural areas, the challenges are low connectivity, lack of ICT equipment, low literacy rates, especially for the household health or caregivers. Of course, accessibility or availability of good internet and technology at an affordable cost with good quality. The biggest challenge we're experiencing right now, even for people who can afford, just to have a 1 hour meeting or a video call or assignment, it takes a lot of bundles. So it means every day when you're budgeting for milk and bread, besides it, you have to put an extra cost for bundles. And I think some companies have already offered some free MBs for education, but it's still not adequate. And not all families are on reliable communication channels. So we are working with our volunteers to make sure that any important information reaches everyone in that village through door to door, of course, while observing the government distancing. And of course, right now parents are seeing children are at home and we have extra pair of hands to help us with chores and responsibility. So education takes the least priority, especially when the household head is not literate. And of course, school infrastructure to support digital learning is still far from what we expect it to be. And lastly, I would say the biggest challenge we have is an unfair competitive edge of public versus public schools. Public versus private schools, you'd find that they're not at the same level, they're not receiving the same kind of support. So even if the exams are to be held, private schools and people from wealthy backgrounds will be able to, they will outdo the poor child who's in a vulnerable community. So that's a very, very unfair competitive edge.
Okay, and Racheal, still focusing on children, since you deal with for those both in the rural setups and urban setups, how can you compare the difference?
So the difference, as I've mentioned, it's day and night comparison. So in one place, I mentioned the three divides, the economic divide. So it's ability to afford a computer and internet versus I cannot afford. So it's already there. Economically, urban and rural areas have distinct characteristics that make the rural community more vulnerable. And even for those who rely on maybe, let's say, something like farming or they had a wage employment, right now most people have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. So you find the economic disparity between urban and rural areas is day and night. Number two is the usability divide, whereby I mentioned, yes, you could have it, but you're not able to use it because you're not literate, you're not computer literate. And this is mostly in rural areas. In urban areas, you find students, IT skills are more sophisticated than their teachers and parents. So you find an urban child and a rural child, ability to navigate a computer, the internet, and use it for learning, day and night comparison. And of course, the household head literacy level is a huge determinant factor of how a child will survive and manage this during this crisis. So if the household head or caregiver is not literate enough, they are not able to support their children in learning. And of course, if you check rural and urban areas in terms of power or solar, it's very low in rural areas. And the capacity of the communities or structure around the child, like the teachers, more urban teachers or school fraternities at least have some level of literacy when it comes to using computers compared to rural areas. And also right now, everyone is struggling economically or financially, and their priority right now is surviving, putting food on the table. So you find that in terms of priority needs, education will come lagging behind, not because they don't want, but because they cannot afford not to put food on the table.
All right, now, students have been using radio and TV, at least during this pandemic time. Do you think that these platforms has at least helped students to continue learning?
So actually, if you just check the households that have radio in Kenya, so in rural it's about 58%, in urban areas it's about 54% compared to the television. So television in rural areas is 26% and in urban areas 62%. So it means a child is more likely to use the radio in rural areas, while in urban areas, a child is more likely to use the TV. So I would feel, especially when you're talking about a child in the rural areas, what the media houses are doing, bringing content into radio, it's really been helpful because it's their only source of digital learning that is as close to digital learning as possible. Again, the only challenge is the interaction, the user interaction is very limited because if a child has to call, can you imagine all children in Kenya are watching the same program, they all have questions they've not understood. So just adding the element of interaction where kids can ask questions, it's still not possible, but I would say it's a huge step in the right direction in support of closing that gap. But I would say radio for rural areas is really effective, but also we need to strengthen the interaction to make sure that at least a two-way communication and not a monologue from the presenter to the kid. But definitely it's really helped both TV and radio. And I'm focusing mostly on the rural areas. Yes, radio is most effective, but again, 58%, it means we still have 42% who do not have radios. How do we also reach them? But it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, and as we draw the conversation to a close, Racheal, what would be your recommendations to help us bridge the gap in this education sector?
So I would say, again, for me, digital equity is about equal access to a computer and that is not shared, having free internet and computer literacy. So I feel a lot of action is needed right now about making these services readily available and affordable. And it's fairly live with the right partnerships and the government coming on the table and saying, how can we support the kids who are in rural areas who do not have internet, who do not have power? How can we expand information infrastructure so that they are able to access it at an affordable cost? And of course, providing alternative solutions that are cost-effective and affordable. So, for example, you said in rural areas, yes, radio is working, but then again, the other people do not have radio, what can we do for them? So also, when it comes to power, not all communities are connected to power. So how can we make sure alternative sources of power, like solar energy, are available? Again, the equipment required, even at least for now, we would target at least one household, at least with a device. It could be a smartphone, it could be a tablet or a laptop. But then again, I know it's very ambitious to say one for each child. So some homes can have 6 children. But at least in the beginning, they can be made available under the free laptop program. Right now, I know they're in school. So is it possible, if they're in school and they're available, can they be traced and given to kids who are at home? But then again, it's capacity built before the laptops are given. So they're only accumulating dust if they're available in schools and not helping when they're actually using. I've talked about free internet for all and not viewing internet as a luxury, but viewing internet as a basic necessity right now. And it should not compete with our basic needs like shelter and water. And I also mentioned about promoting digital literacy through campaigns or incentives to make sure that it's not just having a computer, but it's also the ability to use computer to its fullest potential. And lastly, forming partnership with successful entities like the mobile network providers to make sure when you're talking about free internet for all, they are on board and they can see how the government can incentivize them to be able to provide this as a business model.
All right. Thank you so much, Racheal, for your time.
Thank you, Doreen, for having me.
Great. That has been Racheal Kigame, Director, Help a Child Africa, breaking down for us the issue concerning matters to do with education and the digital divide presented in that sector.